Trains are some of the best ways to move a ton of people, which is why they were built all around the world. Some trains run very long routes, while others run very short routes. And some train lines are so iconic that they give the entire city away when playing Guess the Metro system, while others are extremely obscure that even residents of their own city joke about its existence. Usually, by looking at a train line, it is pretty easy to tell where the city center is and where the suburbs are. But sometimes politics and ridership patterns are so erratic that they produce a train line that look like they were designed by a toddler. So today, let's go around the world and see the wackiest train lines the world has to offer. So starting off, we head to Madrid and it looks alright, but then you notice this green line with a bulge that goes on for a half a mile, and it also has a U in the southwest corner. This is Madrid Metro Line 5, and without any context, it looks like the planners probably sneezed when drawing this line out, and probably thought that it looked good enough and BAM! But some things aren't as straightforward as they seem, literally. Back in the 60s, planners wanted more service to the Embajadores railway station, but the alignment of Line 5 didn't exactly line up. So planners created this bulge for Line 5 to stop near the station so that commuters can easily access Line 5 along with Line 3. Meanwhile, to the southwest, the U-shape was a result of the Suburbano line, now Line 10. Back then, this section was served by this line. But then, in 2002, in preparation for the opening of Line 12, Line 10 was rerouted away from the U and onto a new route. Line 5 trains took over this section, and now 20 years later, this odd U is still in place. At least Madrid had a somewhat okay line as their most wackiest line. But the people over at Toronto thought, you know what is better than a small U on a corner of the map? An entire train line that is just a U. That became the basis for Toronto Line 1, which forms a giant U in the heart of Toronto. When first looking at this abomination, I was like, why didn't the planners just split the U in half at Union Station? Well, this line was originally supposed to be separated into two sections, one at Yonge Street and the other at University Avenue, Spadina Road. But planners realized that they can't build a yard in a city center for the trains to be terminated and be put out of service. So they decided that it would be a better idea to through-run trains from Yonge to Spadina, so trains from the Yonge side can access the mighty Wilson Yard. Half a century later, nothing has changed, as Line 1 has been built off this design to extend deeper into northern Toronto, with the last extension being in 2017. While Toronto Line 1 looks terrible, this U-shape is everywhere. From the Marinucci line in Tokyo, to the Blue line in Chicago, to the F line in New York City. But I cannot say the same for the next line, which makes Line 1 of Toronto look somewhat tame. It is Singapore's downtown line, where there is this giant loop in the middle of the line in downtown Singapore. Basically, it is what I make a brand new subway when I'm bored and my brain is on autopilot. But there is a reason why Singapore spent $9 billion on this line. Originally, this was supposed to be two separate lines, the Bukit Timah line and the Eastern Region line, both intended to relieve congestion on the north-south and east-west lines. Eventually, those lines were combined into the downtown line that we know today, which somewhat explains why it looks so weird. But couldn't they just ditch the loop downtown and make a somewhat manageable U-shape? Well, downtown Singapore is extremely dense, and the subway tracks can't be built with curbs, or else they will carve through the foundation of buildings. So this option was chosen to avoid all of that work, and the loop was fully completed in 2017. With plans to now further extend the downtown line both north and to the southeast, the loop is most likely going to stay. Okay, so the downtown line is a monstrosity to look at, but at least I can classify it. The next train line, I don't even know how to classify because it has everything that makes a train line extremely wacky. It is Istanbul Line 1. And wait a second, this doesn't look so bad. It is just a straight line. What are you talking about? Oops, this is 1989. Let me fast forward a bit, and boom. Now, how do I begin to classify this? People from the southwest end of the line would have to backtrack 7 miles to get to the eastern end because of this giant U. Then we got this W shape for the second branch of line 1, which again, why does this exist? Like, I am pretty sure this is deep bore, so wouldn't it make sense to just dig a straight line through? Like, this line makes absolutely no sense without some additional context. First, in the middle of the two U's lies a major bus station, and it would probably make sense that a subway line would serve that, both from the western and eastern ends of the city. And conveniently, this bus station is the last station before the line splits off into two branches. So that kinda explains why planners had planned these two U's. And if you want to avoid that massive two U's inside of a giant U, then just take the T1 tram or the Montmartre. So this line kinda makes sense given that planners wanted to connect a major bus station to the rest of the network. Plus there are two train lines that bypass that U shape. But the final wacky train line is right back in New York City, mainly the M train. And did you notice anything strange? Well, it should take you less than a second, mainly because the M train is an incomplete loop. And yes, this is a separate category from Toronto Line 1 because the M isn't a U shape, but rather, as I said earlier, an incomplete loop. Not only do both terminals are less than 3 miles away from one another, they end up in the same borough. Even better, there are no plans to close the M train. So why is that? Well, politics. The southern terminal of the M was part of the Myrtle Avenue line that used to run to downtown Brooklyn and Park Row in Manhattan. This portion of the line was part of the Brooklyn Manhattan Transit Corporation, or BMT. The northern terminal of the M was part of the Queens Boulevard line and was built by the Independent Subway System, or IND. Due to the hostility between the BMT and IND, no plans ever came to connect the Myrtle Avenue line to the Queens Boulevard line. After the BMT was bought out by the IND and the subway system was rebranded to the New York City Transit Authority, nothing interesting happened. So let's skip the boring history and head to 1967, when the Christie Street connection opened. We all knew that linked the IND system with the BMT Southern Division. But that project also linked up the IND with the BMT Eastern Division, which the Myrtle Avenue line was a part of. As a result, the new KK service ran on 6th Avenue to the BMT Jamaica line. Although that is not Myrtle Avenue yet, that will be relevant for later. In 1969, the Myrtle Avenue line ended service from downtown Brooklyn to Myrtle Broadway, meaning trains that needed to get to Myrtle Avenue now had to travel across the BMT Jamaica line. In 1976, the KK service was discontinued because of low ridership, and that connection between the IND and BMT Eastern Division sat unused until 2010. Basically, there were budget cuts, and the MTA decided to combine two routes. The V, which ran on Queens Boulevard and 6th Avenue, and the Brown M, which ran on Myrtle and BMT Jamaica, to form the Orange M. That ended up happening, using the old connection built under the Christie Street Connection project, which is why we have this incomplete loop. So what we have of the M was the result of two companies, the BMT and the IND, and the MTA back in 2010 being forced to implement this. Now that the M has exploded in popularity, this current M train service is likely to stay. There are a bunch of other weird subway lines around the world, but if I did feature all of them, we would be here all week. So I am just going to end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want me to feature even more wacky subway lines around the world, comment below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.